Welcome to my week number 2 overview video for managerial economics here at Rutgers University in Camden. And in week 2 we're going to be looking at chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3 deals with empirical methods for demand analysis. In this chapter, make sure you are very comfortable with the calculation and the interpretation of the elasticity measures that are in the textbook. This is quite critical for this particular chapter. So make sure that you feel comfortable with that. Also, make sure you're comfortable, A, with what regression analysis is. You don't have to have too much of a technical understanding of it, but make sure you have a general idea of what is meant when somebody does a regression analysis, and also how to use the results from the regression analysis to determine the effect of changing price and changing income on quantity demanded. Very, very important to do. As I said, I don't expect you to understand the actual technical components of that, but to have a generalized idea of what a regression analysis is, and when you get results, how do you use those particular results. Also understanding what it means when a regression coefficient is statistically significant. So how do you make that determination, and why is that important? Also, a key point is to understand why specifying the correct model is appropriate. What are the issues if you don't specify the appropriate models? And what steps can you take to get the right model in place? For example, you might accidentally exclude a very important variable. What is the impact of excluding that variable on your regression analysis? How does it bias your results? And also, how regression analysis is used in a forecasting environment, and what are some of the issues that you will have if you forecast. For example, if you have sales for your company for quarterly for the last 20 years, and you use that to forecast what sales are going to be in, let's say, the first quarter of 2016, and then second quarter 2016. The purposes of doing that type of analysis and the shortcomings, and in particular, the further away you go into the future, what happens to your estimates? Do they become more precise? Do they become less precise? After that, we are going to be doing chapter 4, which is consumer choice, and in here we're going to be talking about utility maximization. So here, make sure you understand the properties of preference and how they are used to predict individual preferences. Also understand what is utility. Economists often refer to utility as an imaginary unit of satisfaction, a measurement of how much satisfaction somebody's getting. If you go into a store or you go into a cafe and you buy a beer or a soda or whatever, and you consume that, you derive some level of utility from the consumption of that, and also the fact that that there is a utility function. So utility is going to be a function of specific items. So make sure you realize what a utility function is and how it is actually used. Also, make sure you understand the budget constraint, what it is, what it represents. Also, make sure you understand that what happens to the budget constraint when prices and income change. When price changes, the slope of the budget constraint changes, while when income changes, you end up having a horizontal shifting of the, not horizontal, a perpendicular shifting of the budget constraint. So the budget constraint itself, it completely will shift to the right or shift to the left. So make sure you understand what the budget constraint is and how price and income affect how the budget constraint actually looks like. Also, make sure you're comfortable with constraint maximization, the utility maximization problem. That is using the budget constraint and the indifference curve to determine what is the utility maximizing combination of goods and services for a particular budget constraint and set of indifference curves. Also, make sure you're comfortable with using that budget constraint and indifference curve analysis to actually derive why the demand curve is downward sloping. So make sure you're comfortable with that. And also the chapter goes over some elements of behavioral economics. Just be familiar with some of those concepts. It's not a main focus of the textbook, but behavioral economics is becoming more and more important, a more and more vibrant field in economics. So make sure you're aware of some of these terms and the concepts that are used in behavioral economics.